China recently canceled a 1.104 million ton order of American corn. According to the plan, this batch of corn was supposed to clear customs and enter the Chinese market in mid-May this year. The Chicago Mercantile Exchange pointed out that as a major global corn importer, China is striving to diversify its corn import channels to reduce its reliance on American corn. Starting this year, China has significantly increased its purchases of corn from Brazil and South Africa. Last month, the first batch of corn feed purchased from South Africa by China arrived in Dongguan, Guangdong. According to reports from Hong Kong media, COFCO Group signed a strategic cooperation agreement with more than 40 corn farms in South Africa. These farms will supply corn to China based on Chinese requirements. Amidst the ongoing Russia-Ukraine conflict, escalating China-US confrontation, and frequent extreme weather events worldwide, international grain prices have experienced severe fluctuations in the past year or two, resulting in unstable supply and food crises in several countries. In this context, it is reasonable for China to seek more food import channels, which is also an important measure to ensure China's food security. Taking corn imports as an example, according to China's customs data, China imported 20.62 million tons of corn last year, with approximately 15 million tons coming from the United States, accounting for over 70% of the total. Grain experts indicate that when a particular grain from a country constitutes over half of the total grain imports in an importing country, the importing nation needs to constantly pay attention to the supply security of that grain. If the exporting country stops the supply, the importing country will face significant impact. Clearly, China has recognized this issue. Since the second half of last year, China has reduced its imports of American corn. By the first quarter of this year, the share of American corn in China's total corn imports for the same period has already decreased to 37.8%. With the increase in corn exports to China from countries like Brazil and South Africa in the future, China's reliance on American corn will further decline. It is not only corn, the import of other grains from the United States to China is also declining, such as soybeans. According to data from the General Administration of Customs, China's total soybean imports last year amounted to approximately 91 million metric tons, with around 29.5 million metric tons coming from the United States, a decrease of 10 percentage points compared to the previous year. At the same time, soybean imports from Uruguay, a South American country, surged by 107% compared to the previous year. While ensuring stability in major soybean supplying countries like Brazil and Argentina, China is also developing new soybean import channels, including Ethiopia and Tanzania in Africa, which have been included in China's soybean import scope. According to Japanese media, the decline in grain imports from the United States to China will not only impact the U.S. grain exports but also affect global grain prices. Over the past 2 decades, China's significant demand for American grain has supported grain prices, bringing substantial benefits to American grain traders and farmers. As China's grain imports enter a diversified era, the volume of U.S. grain exports to China is inevitably going to decline, and export revenues will also decrease. U.S. grain traders and farmers need to seek new export markets. After the backlash of decoupling from China hit the United States itself, U.S. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen recently publicly stated that decoupling from China would be a huge mistake and that such a thing should not be allowed to happen. Yellen expressed during a congressional hearing that while there are indeed many issues between the two countries, these problems can be gradually resolved, and decoupling is not the right approach. According to Yellen, the trade between China and the United States benefits not only China but also the American people who reap the rewards. Yellen stated that decoupling from China would bring disastrous consequences for the United States. The most pressing task for the United States is to reduce trade risks with China rather than contemplating decoupling. It is worth noting that Yellen unusually praised China's poverty alleviation efforts. There is no doubt that decoupling is not in the interests of both China and the United States. last year, despite the significant headwinds of deteriorating bilateral relations, China and the United States miraculously achieved a historic high in trade, with the total trade volume approaching $700 billion. This data fully demonstrates the strong complementarity of the two countries' economies. Maintaining normal trade between the two nations is the hope of American businesses and the American people, and China-US trade can bring tangible benefits to both sides. Corn is one of China's three major staple grains. In addition to being used as food, it is also used as animal feed and is needed in industries such as medicine, construction, and textiles. Although China cultivates corn, it is far from meeting the demand of its 1.4 billion population, resulting in a significant demand for imported corn, which is the reality China faces. Currently, the top three corn import sources for China are the United States, Brazil, and Ukraine. The United States and Ukraine have a high share in China's corn imports. Among them, the United States accounts for 70%, and the conflict between Russia and Ukraine has created uncertainty in Ukraine's corn production and import quantity. Looking at China's long-standing import proportion of over 72% from the United States, China relies on the U.S. corn market, and U.S. corn also relies on the Chinese market. Unlike microchips, corn cannot be stored for an extended period if it cannot be sold. With production capacity and output in place, if corn cannot be sold, it becomes a problem. The agricultural sector accounts for approximately 1.2% of the U.S. GDP. The United States is not only the world's largest industrialized country but also the largest agriculturally advanced country. Under increased competition in more markets, the U.S. agricultural economy may suffer, which is something the U.S. agricultural sector is unwilling to bear. China will continue to reduce corn imports in the future. According to a recent report from China's Ministry of Agriculture and Rural Affairs, it is expected that China's self-sufficiency rate for corn will reach 96.6% by 2032, and annual imports will decrease to 6.85 million tons. The surplus corn production, including the long-standing support for U.S. grain exports, has become a headache for the United States in the face of China's strategic shift. The question arises, to whom will the excess capacity be sold? Whether it is corn or other raw material products, China has been adjusting its export-oriented economy, promoting industrial upgrading, the Belt and Road Initiative, and seeking alternatives beyond the U.S. market and U.S. raw materials to expand diversified import channels. After Brazilian President Lula's visit to China, the corn export channel between China and Brazil has become increasingly smooth. With China's substantial demand for corn, Brazil has the potential to become the world's largest corn exporter this year. In essence, China's 1.4 billion people need to ensure their own food security, not allowing the control of international agribusiness capital, and holding the key to food security in their own hands. It is a matter far more important than microchips. If China takes back control of its rice bowl, it may render the methods that the United States once used to control corn pricing ineffective. The United States may have no choice but to watch China set the rules, which could be another significant move toward the internationalization of the Chinese yuan. Feel free to share your thoughts in the comments section. Subscribe to our channel to learn more about import-export trade knowledge. See you in the next video.